Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Speaking Practice. Today's topic is something very real, something many of us struggle with: how to express your opinion like a native speaker. And honestly, this is not just about English. It's about confidence.
Yeah, because sometimes even if you know the words, you still hesitate. You overthink. You translate in your head. And by the time you're ready, the moment is gone.
Exactly. And I've felt that. There was this time I wanted to share my opinion in a group discussion. I knew what I wanted to say, but in my mind, I was thinking, what if my grammar is wrong? What if they don't understand me?
Let me guess, you stayed quiet.
Yeah. And it felt worse than making a mistake.
That's the real problem. People think the goal is perfect English, but native speakers, they're not perfect. They're just natural.
So today, we're going to talk about how to sound natural when expressing your opinion. Not perfect, just real.
Let's start with something simple. Many learners say, in my opinion, every single time.
Which is correct, but it can sound repetitive, right?
Exactly. Native speakers often use softer, more natural phrases like I think, or I feel like, or even honestly.
Oh, I like that. Honestly, it feels more personal.
Right. For example, instead of saying, in my opinion, this movie is good, you can say, honestly, I think this movie is really good.
That already sounds more natural and more confident.
Confidence is key. But here's the thing, being confident doesn't mean being aggressive.
That's true. Sometimes we're afraid to express opinions because we don't want to sound rude.
Exactly. And this is where native-like expressions help. They soften your opinion. For example, you can say, I see your point, but I think...
Oh, that's good. So you're not directly disagreeing, you're showing respect first.
Yes. Another one is, I get what you're saying, but for me...
That sounds very natural. It feels like a real conversation.
Because it is. Language is not just learned, it's absorbed.
I love that.
Let's give one more example. If someone says something you agree with, instead of just saying yes, you can say,
Yeah, I totally agree.
or even more natural, exactly, or that's so true.
That sounds more engaging.
Because it shows emotion, and that's what makes communication real.
So let me summarize what we talked about. Expressing your opinion like a native means using simple phrases, softening your tone, being natural, and not being afraid to sound human.
And most importantly, don't wait for perfect English before you speak.
Because silence won't improve your speaking, but trying will.
Exactly.
You know, what you said earlier about silence really stayed with me. Because I think a lot of learners don't struggle with ideas, they struggle with saying those ideas out loud.
That's true. And sometimes it's not even about vocabulary, it's fear. Fear of being judged or misunderstood.
Yeah, like when you're in a conversation and you have something to say, but you keep replaying the sentence in your head.
Fixing the grammar, changing the words until it sounds perfect.
And then suddenly the topic changes and you missed your chance.
That moment is painful, but it also teaches something important. Native speakers don't wait for perfect sentences. They speak in real time.
So how do we do that? How do we stop overthinking and start speaking more naturally?
One powerful technique is thinking in chunks, not full sentences.
Chunks?
Yeah, instead of building a long, perfect sentence, you use small, natural phrases. For example, I think, maybe. For me, it feels like.
So it's like building your idea step by step while speaking?
Exactly. Native speakers do this all the time. They don't always plan everything. They flow.
Let me try. I think, for me, this situation feels a bit unfair.
That's perfect. And notice you didn't need a complicated sentence.
Wow, that actually feels easier.
Because it is. Overcomplicating is what slows you down.
I think another problem is translating from your native language.
Yes, that's a big one. When you translate, your sentence becomes unnatural.
Like, sometimes I want to say something, but in English it sounds too direct or too awkward.
Exactly. That's why it's better to learn how natives express ideas, not just words. That's a good point, because communication is not just speaking, it's reacting.
Exactly. Like, when someone shares their opinion, native speakers don't just jump in and say their own idea, they respond first.
Yes, they acknowledge. That's a very important habit.
So instead of immediately saying, I disagree, you can start with something like,
That's interesting. Or, I've never thought about it that way.
oh, that sounds so natural, and it feels respectful too.
Because it is. It shows that you're listening, not just waiting to speak.
I think that's something many learners forget. They focus on their next sentence instead of the conversation.
Exactly. And when you focus too much on your sentence, you lose the connection.
So expressing your opinion like a native is also about being present.
Yes, being present, reacting naturally, and then sharing your thoughts.
Let's try a real situation. Imagine someone says, I think working from home is better than working in an office.
Okay, a natural response could be, yeah, I see why you'd say that. It's definitely more comfortable, but for me, I feel like working in an office helps me stay focused.
Wow, that flows so smoothly. You didn't just give your opinion, you built it.
Exactly. Native speakers often layer their responses. First acknowledgement, then opinion.
Let me try. That's a good point. I guess it depends, but I personally prefer working from home.
That's great. Very natural.
It feels like you're not attacking the other person, you're just sharing your side.
And that's the goal. Conversations are not debates, they're exchanges.
Another thing I've noticed, natives use examples when they express opinions.
Yes, that's a big one. Examples make your opinion clearer.
So instead of saying, I think exercise is important, you can say,
I think exercise is really important. Like when I started working out, I felt more energetic every day.
that sounds more real, more personal.
Because stories and examples make your opinion stronger and easier to understand.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you support it.
Exactly. Even simple examples work.
I want to try another one. I feel like learning English every day helps a lot. For example, when I practice speaking, I become more confident.
Perfect. That's clear, natural, and easy to follow.
You know what I'm realizing now? Native speakers don't try to sound smart, they try to sound clear.
That's a big mindset shift. Clarity over complexity.
Because sometimes learners think using big words makes them sound better.
But often it makes them sound less natural.
Right. Like instead of saying, this situation is extremely detrimental, you can say, this situation is really bad.
Simple, but effective.
Exactly. Simplicity is powerful. What about when you want to sound more engaged in a conversation?
Good question. Native speakers often use small reactions while listening.
Like, yeah, right, I see.
Yes, those are called back-channel responses. They show you're actively listening.
So even if you're not speaking much, you're still part of the conversation.
Exactly, and it makes your final opinion feel more natural.
Let me try a full response using everything we learned. Yeah, I see what you mean. That makes sense. But honestly, I feel like there's a better way to handle this. For example, we could try something simpler.
That's really good. That sounds like a native speaker.
Really?
Yes, because it flows naturally, it's clear, and it connects ideas smoothly.
I think the biggest lesson here is expressing your opinion is not about being perfect. It's about being real, clear, and connected.
Exactly, and also being okay with small mistakes.
That's still hard for many people.
I know, but think about this. When you hear someone speak imperfect English, do you judge them?
No, I actually respect them for trying.
Exactly, and most people feel the same way.
So the fear is mostly in our heads.
Yes, and the only way to break that fear is to speak anyway,
Even if your voice shakes a little.
even if your sentence isn't perfect.
Because every time you express your opinion, you improve.
And every conversation makes you more natural.
I feel like this topic is deeper than just English. So instead of saying, I don't agree with you, you can say,
I see it differently.
oh, that sounds smoother.
Right. Another example, if you want to say something is difficult, instead of saying this is very hard, you can say,
This is kind of challenging.
yes, that's more natural and less harsh.
So, natives often soften their opinions, even when they disagree.
Exactly. It keeps the conversation friendly.
What about situations where you feel nervous, like talking to someone fluent?
That's normal, but here's the truth. Fluency doesn't mean perfection. Even native speakers pause, hesitate, and make mistakes.
Really?
All the time. They say things like, let me think, how do I say this?
So, pausing is okay.
Not just okay, they're natural.
That actually makes me feel better. I always thought I needed to speak smoothly all the time.
No, smoothness comes from comfort, not pressure.
So instead of forcing myself to be perfect, I should allow myself to pause.
Exactly. For example, you can say, give me a second. I think,
That sounds so natural, like you're really thinking.
because you are. Communication is not a performance, it's a process.
I like that. It takes away the pressure.
Another thing that helps is using personal reactions.
What do you mean?
Instead of just giving an opinion, you connect it to how you feel. For example, that surprised me. I didn't expect that. That makes sense to me.
Oh, so it becomes more emotional.
Yes, and that's how native speakers communicate. They mix thoughts with feelings.
Let me try. Honestly, that doesn't really make sense to me.
That's very natural.
Or, I feel like there's a better way to do this.
Exactly. That's how conversations flow in real life.
You know, I'm starting to realize something.
What is it?
Expressing your opinion in English is not about impressing people, it's about connecting with them.
That's a powerful realization.
Because when you try too hard to sound advanced, you lose your natural voice.
Yes, simplicity is what makes you sound real.
So if someone listening right now feels stuck, what's one thing they should start doing today?
Start small. Every day, express one opinion out loud, even if you're alone.
Like talking to yourself?
Yes, for example, watch a video and pause it, then say your opinion. I think this is interesting. I don't really agree with that. That's a good point,
That's actually a great exercise.
because it trains your brain to respond in English without translating.
And over time, it becomes automatic.
Exactly. Fluency is built through repetition, not perfection.
I love that. Repetition, not perfection.
And remember, your voice matters. Even if your English isn't perfect, your opinion still has value.
That's something a lot of people forget.
Yeah, they focus so much on language that they forget the message.
But at the end of the day, communication is about being understood, not being flawless.
Exactly.
You know, something just clicked for me while we were talking. I think a lot of people believe that expressing opinions is about talking more, but actually, it's also about how you respond.
That's a good point, because communication is not just speaking, it's reacting.
Exactly. Like, when someone shares their opinion, native speakers don't just jump in and say their own idea, they respond first.
Yes, they acknowledge. That's a very important habit.
So instead of immediately saying, I disagree, you can start with something like,
That's interesting. Or, I've never thought about it that way.
oh, that sounds so natural, and it feels respectful too.
Because it is. It shows that you're listening, not just waiting to speak.
I think that's something many learners forget. They focus on their next sentence instead of the conversation.
Exactly. And when you focus too much on your sentence, you lose the connection.
So expressing your opinion like a native is also about being present.
Yes, being present, reacting naturally, and then sharing your thoughts.
Let's try a real situation. Imagine someone says, I think working from home is better than working in an office.
Okay,
You know, something just clicked for me while we were talking. I think a lot of people believe that expressing opinions is about talking more, but actually, it's also about how you respond.
it is. It's about confidence, identity, and finding your voice.
And once you find that voice, language becomes a tool, not a barrier.
Exactly.
After everything we've talked about, I feel like expressing your opinion is not just a skill, it's a habit you build over time.
That's true. And like any habit, it gets stronger the more you practice it in real situations.
Yeah, and I think this is where many learners get stuck again. They understand everything we discussed, but when it's time to actually speak, they freeze.
Because practice feels uncomfortable.
Exactly. But maybe that discomfort is actually part of the process.
It is. Think about it. Every time you try to express your opinion, even if it's messy, your brain is learning how to organize thoughts in English.
So even mistakes are helping you improve.
Yes, mistakes are not failures. They're feedback.
I like that. It changes how you see the whole experience.
And here's another important thing. Don't wait for the perfect moment to speak.
Because that moment doesn't really exist, right?
Exactly. Conversations are unpredictable. You just have to jump in.
Even with something simple like, I think so, or I'm not sure about that.
Yes, short opinions are still opinions.
I think people underestimate that. They feel like they need to say something long or impressive.
But in real conversations, short and clear is better.
Right, like, I agree. That makes sense. I see it differently.
Those are powerful already.
Another thing I've noticed is that native speakers often adjust their opinions while speaking.
That's a great observation.
Like, they start with one idea, then change it a little as they talk.
Exactly. They might say, I think this is a good idea. Actually, wait, maybe it depends on the situation.
Oh, so it's okay to change your mind while speaking.
Not just okay, it's natural.
That takes a lot of pressure off. You don't need to have everything figured out before you speak.
Yes, speaking is thinking out loud.
I love that. Speaking is thinking out loud.
And that's why your opinion doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest.
So, if someone listening right now wants to improve, what's a simple daily habit they can start?
I'd say practice giving your opinion about everyday things.
Like what?
Like the food you eat, the videos you watch, or even your workout.
Oh, that's easy to apply.
For example, I think this meal tastes really good. I feel like this video is helpful. I don't really enjoy this exercise.
That's actually something you can do anytime.
Exactly. You don't need a perfect environment. You just need consistency.
And over time, those small opinions become natural conversations.
Yes, and you'll notice something. You'll stop translating.
That's the goal, right?
Yes, when you stop translating, you start thinking in English.
And when you think in English, expressing your opinion becomes faster and more natural.
Exactly.
I feel like this journey is really about trusting yourself.
It is. Trusting your voice, your thoughts, and your ability to communicate.
Even if it's not perfect yet.
Especially when it's not perfect yet.
Because that's where growth happens.
Yes, growth happens in those imperfect, real moments.
So, to everyone listening right now, if you've been holding back your opinion because you're afraid of mistakes,
this is your sign to start speaking.
Start simple.
Start small.
But most importantly,
start now.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy.
And see you in the next video.